Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast. Learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 98, and I'll be talking to Jennifer Moore, an author of multi-award winning Amazon bestseller Empathic Mastery, foundation and headmistress of Empathic Mastery Academy and Fairy Godmother Apprenticeship Program, as well as a host of Empathic Mastery Show podcast. She's a master trainer for EFT International and a mentor and healer for other highly sensitive, empathic women. Magical intuitive from the get-go, Jennifer experienced her first prophetic dream when she was 9. She's been navigating her extrasensory awarenesses ever since. Supporting intuitives, light workers, and creatives to use their abilities for good is Jen's greatest passion. Hello and welcome to Jennifer. How are you, Jennifer?
I am doing very well. It's a beautiful day here.
And I'm excited to have this conversation with you, not only to unravel all of your experiences and expertise in the world of mystery, if that's a fair statement, but also in the unseen world, because I see that you have so much experience. And from what I can sense and feel from you, looking at you, because we're on video conference, you're really embodying that on a whole different level to support individuals through their journey of evolution, essentially. So I want to get into some of this juiciness.
Oh, that sounds so wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so grateful to be here. And I can just tell, even from the beginning, that you and I are going to have a wonderful conversation.
It's going to be a ride. So, yes. I'm looking forward to it. I am, absolutely. So I'm going to begin with a really big and bold question is, what do you believe about yourself and how do you feel that that defines you?
Wow. What a big, bold question. What do I believe about myself? I believe that I am a work in progress. I believe that I am constantly evolving. I believe that I am a cell in the body of this earth. And that when I know that, I do a lot better than when I think I am separate. I believe that I am interconnected to something substantially greater than me. And again, when I acknowledge that and I feel that connection, life is easier. And when I try to run on the battery pack, I can only get so far. And I believe that I believe that I am worthy of divine love, of divine support, and of being happy, of being on this, of being able to walk gently on this earth and receive the sort of the bounty and the abundance of this earth. And I believe that's true for everybody as well. So I could go on and on, but those are sort of the first things that come to my mind.
And so beautiful and so enriching in how you express that. And I know it felt possibly very organic, but it felt truth to you, which is what I felt from you. So
I just listened to my heart. I just reached in and pulled out what was there. And that's,
And I felt it. So also thank you for being so vulnerable. Because often when we go into those places of our own heart, it's a huge sense of vulnerability.
Yes. Well, and for me, in my personal experience, what I have found again and again and again is that when I am willing to be vulnerable and when I'm willing to be authentic, life has a way of working so much more smoothly and beautifully, and in some weird way, sort of effortlessly, or at least frictionlessly. That's a better way to describe it. It's not
Hmm.
effortless, but it is frictionless.
Yes.
Then when I try to curate my appearance, when I try to, pick and choose, and when my ego and my will is trying to control the outcome or trying to control the agenda.
Yeah.
And so, it's my experience is that vulnerability is in many ways the key to living a joyful life.
I couldn't agree more. However, it comes with a huge asterisk of the courage it takes to be vulnerable, because it's
Mhm.
not an easy task and it's
No.
not an easy process to do that, especially with somebody that you've just met on video conferencing like you and I less than 10-15 minutes
Right,
ago.
right. Well, and Naranjan, I think what immediately came to my mind is that vulnerability is really hard if we don't have boundaries and if we don't trust ourselves with our boundaries. And I've done a lot of work on trusting my boundaries and also trusting my intuition. And so I trust that if you and I started going down a really weird rabbit hole, I could set a boundary. I could say, this doesn't feel comfortable to me. But also, as somebody who's worked a lot with my intuition, I could just tell you and I basically connected visually, but I could feel our hearts and our sort of telepathic minds syncing up. And so it was like, even though we have only in the time space continuum been talking for maybe,
Mm-hmm.
at this point 15 minutes, I beyond space and time, you and I are sunk up and
Yeah.
like, oh, hi, you. So
Yes.
and that's in many ways that's also how I approach podcasting, is that when I am either looking for a guest or looking to be a guest on somebody's podcast, I feel the energy and I tune into who they are as a person and whether we would have a good fit. And when I sense it will be a good fit, that's when I'm kind of like, let's make this happen. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it is so beautifully led by our intuition, because I
Yes.
echo the same sentiments. I often run my entire business that way, as well as the podcasting too. Very
Hmm.
intuitive. And it's a fun way because the mind does, oh, we just let it do other things. And we follow this beautiful flow of what life is presented to us and recognize we get, of course, because some of the external messages get really loud and it throws us off a bit, but we recenter and we find our own truth
Yes.
and our own
Yes.
truth in our own heart, because it's different for everyone.
Well, and as you're speaking, I'm really thinking about, it's like I let my mind gets to come along for the ride and enjoy the process and definitely gets to contribute to the conversation, but it's my heart and my spirit, my soul
Mm-hmm.
that lead this. Those are the parts that lead. And the mind serves those sort of the higher parts of myself. And as long as my mind understands its place, all is well. When my mind decides to try to jump in and take over, then things can get really challenging.
That's right. But
Yeah.
that's the ride of life, right?
Isn't it? Totally.
That's the ride that we all agreed to when we
Yeah.
came here. So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
What do you feel is your calling here? Well, perhaps one of many of your callings in this life.
My calling, when I really feel I've had a number of callings. One of my foundational callings that I learned or I discovered when I was 18 years old was to do everything in my power to spread the word of the divine feminine, to express, to share her beauty, to share her grace, to put her out into the world. I saw The Dinner Party by Judy Chicago when it was touring. and which is a really spectacular art exhibit, which is now permanently housed at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. And it's
Mm.
39, it's a table setting set created like a triangle with 39 place settings, so 13 on each side of historical figures and goddesses from sort of primordial times forward. And it was something that inspired me so deeply that I knew that a very big piece of my life's mission was going to be to support her, to promote her, to let people know about the fact that God is not just a guy in the sky, but that there are feminine aspects of the divine. So that was sort of is one of my biggest missions. And then the other really big mission for me is to work with and to support other highly sensitive empaths to, number one, identify as empaths and understand what it means to be an empath in this world and why this can be so challenging, and to give empaths tools so that they are not picking up the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the sensations, the struggles that are coming from the world around them. And I feel so passionate about this because I know what it's like to be drowning in the emotional soup and not know which end is up and not know what's yours and what's not yours, and to just really feel so completely like upended that you just feel like you've been caught in an undertow. I know what that feels like, and I also know what relief feels like. So being able to help other people not constantly be upended by the misery of the world is such an incredibly important thing to me.
That's powerful. And they are very big asks, missions, and visions that you have for your life. So
Yes, yes, yeah,
they take a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability, which we've already talked about,
yeah.
but a lot of strength to be honoring yourself, but to bring in whomever, whatever, to support you and guide you through that process to be of greater service, right?
Yes. Well, and you bring up a really good point about to bring in the support, because I think in our culture, we have such an idea that we're supposed to DIY all of it, that we're supposed to be, islands unto ourselves. And, I mean, there's lip service to hiring a team and doing, getting help and getting support. But I do think that there's a great deal of, if I, sort of like nobody's going to do it as well as I can. And, kind of like just basically just like suck it up and do it.
Mhm.
And I completely agree that welcoming support, asking for help, being in collaboration takes vulnerability. And it is also the only way we're going to be able to do this. Like
Yes,
we cannot do this on our own. And so asking for help, I do agree. I think it takes a certain strength and a certain courage that, but the alternative is you can try to do it on your own, but you will crash and burn.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And in many facets, when we look at life and human nature, there is this huge amalgamation of how things are done in tandem with other things. Be it we look at nature.
Mm-hmm.
A tree wouldn't be a tree if it didn't have the water, if it didn't have the soil, if it didn't have the climate, if it didn't have the temperatures. None of that would happen. Our physical body wouldn't be able to function if we didn't
No.
have all the organs and the water and the blood and the vessels and all the components. So we have to work in tandem. We have to work collectively together.
Well, and I think there's this huge illusion that we've bought into. I channeled a book back in July where I got a lot of material from my spirit team. And one of the things that I had started that had been coming through for a while is that I'd said earlier is we're cells in the body of this earth. And the the thing is that we have been in sort of this illusion for thousands of years of separation, this idea that we are individuals instead of interconnected. And I mean, even I was having a conversation with a client the other day who just had surgery, and we were talking about the allopathic approach to things because they were experiencing a number of different interconnected symptoms that were all related. And yet the way that the doctors were looking at it, it was like the heart palpitations were completely unrelated to the tenderness, the hip tenderness, completely unrelated to the nausea, completely unrelated to the sense of urgency when it came to needing to use the bathroom. And to me, it was so clear that all of this was interconnected, that when one part of the system has been disoriented and disrupted um, and is discombobulated and inflamed, then every other piece of the system, it's a cascade that affects everything. And it was interesting because they could see the interconnection, but it was fascinating how the doctors were kind of looking at everything in terms of like little separate compartments and boxes and not thinking about the interconnection of all of it. So it makes sense that if we can't even think of our own bodies in terms of the way that they're interconnected, it makes sense that we have a really hard time recognizing the interdependence and interconnection of all things that
Mhm.
surround us all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that I completely agree. But to a certain degree, that's not new news. We've
No.
been indoctrinated with the isolation of
Yeah.
symptoms and issues and concerns for decades.
Yeah.
So, symbolically, while we are reconnecting and bringing everything into perhaps a grid that leans onto each other in the outside world, we're doing it in the inside world energetically within this physical vessel called the body.
Yeah.
But it's also happening esoterically as well.
Absolutely. And I really do believe that we are awakening as a species, that we are awakening even as a planet to our interconnection, our interdependence, and to the fact that, the back has a front, that, it's like you cannot do something here without it being affected there as well. And it feels to me like more and more of us are awakening to this foundational truth of what is, that has
Mm-hmm.
just been sort of stripped away from us for increase. And it feels like increasingly, as you were saying, the last few decades, I mean, certainly very much since the Industrial Revolution. And
Absolutely.
yeah, even and I have a background as an artist, and looking at art history,
Yeah.
there was a very interesting thing that happened with the expressionists, where up until that point art had been about um, social and religious devotion and promoting or perpetuating like uh, kind of like cultural and collective views.
Mm-hmm.
And with the expressionist period, suddenly people started to communicate or express their art in this form, really expressing about individuality. And
Yes.
this idea of individuality is really kind of, it's a fairly new concept in
Mm-hmm.
in in the idea of humanity.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Ironically, I do also have a history in a background of art history too. So I I completely agree, and I know where you're going with that in terms of the influence of not only the depictions of what is imprinted as history on
Yeah.
canvas, but also the rituals that go along with it, and that could be, I don't want to say, based on the light and the dark. So we
Hmm.
have access to all of those.
Hmm.
However, I'm going to go
Yeah.
to a place of, what do you feel are some of the attributes that you have garnered and harnessed and really polished that connect you to the purpose of spreading more love and more divine wisdom out to the world?
So some of the attributes that I have, I feel like I was born with, like the capacity for a great deal of empathic awareness. That is something I came in with, and the capacity to be really creative and to think outside of the box and to see things in an unusual way is also something that I feel that I came in with. The ability to listen, the ability to be really present with people, the ability to hold space for a depth of emotion, those are things that I have cultivated, that I have really worked on, that I have been committed to. And also the ability to have a gentle but firm grasp on the reins of my life, where there is a level of consistency and persistence that allows me to keep showing up one day at a time, again and again and again. Because, I mean, the name of your show, Master of Your Crafts, in order to be a master, we must be willing to commit the time that it takes to get there. And you don't go from beginner to master in even in a semester. It is a many year process. Yeah, there has to be the willingness to suck at it. Like there
Hmm.
absolutely has to be the willingness to be lousy for a long period of time before we get to the place where we really start to feel like it's flowing and it's
Yes.
easy and it's wonderful. So, so for me, it's been about that consistence, that persistence, that willingness. I don't want to use the word discipline because it has so much kind of, I don't know, negative connotation to it. And it kind of feels like it's very harsh. And
Mm.
what I'll say is that while you could say there's been a certain amount of discipline just in showing up again and again and again, for me, it's more about consistence, persistence, and the willingness to be willing to keep going and to move through the discomfort of not being great at something for a period of
Mhm.
time.
And how beautiful that you've been able to articulate all of those in terms of not only the ones that you've developed, but the innate ones that came within.
Yeah.
And perhaps we do a little detour in life, we recognize these are the attributes that I had as a young child or a young adolescent or a young adult. But then life takes over and it takes us on a trajectory of living very densely in this third dimensional world before we get to the awakening stage of what am I really here for?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was really lucky in that. So my birth experience was fairly traumatic in that my mother, I had two placentas. And um, when my mom gave birth to me after my placenta, my umbilical cord and the placentas came out, my mom started to hemorrhage. And so my mom nearly died giving birth to me. And I really believe that because of the circumstances of my birth, I basically kind of came in through the outdoor. And I feel like I did not have the amnesia that a lot of people have being born. I also had a major clue in that I was born on Christmas night. And even though I was not born to Christians, my parents were agnostic. My mother was a recovering ex-Catholic, and my father had been raised in an intellectual kind of non-practicing sort of agnostic
Mm-hmm.
household.
Yeah.
I was born on Christmas night in a Christian country. So
Mm-hmm.
it was, it certainly was a hint that there was something
Mm-hmm.
there. So I've always had this deep sense of purpose and this deep sense of a mission that was substantially like that, just this great mission. And so I've always been sort of trying to follow along that trajectory. And what I would say is that the density of life had a lot more to do with my emotional wounds and the challenges of being highly sensitive and an empath, because much of what was getting me bogged down was the fact that I was overwhelmed by all of the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that I was absorbing from the
Mm-hmm.
world around me. And my coping skills, which often were like my first sort of go-tos were diving into books, like reading books and
Mm-hmm.
eating sugar. Like food was the self-soother. And as I got older, it went from, the books sort of fell away, and, then rock and roll music and everything like that. But going from, food was always a constant, but then adding, some drugs and alcohol, and then adding like sex and sex and drugs and
Mm-hmm.
rock and roll
Mm-hmm.
to try to function and cope. But in a way, it was like my pain never, or the pain I absorbed, maybe in a more accurate way to describe it, never allowed me to step away from my path too far. It kind of kept me, like, it was like my pain was almost like gravity that kept me close to my mission. And because, there's a saying that you getting sick and tired of being sick and tired,
Mm-hmm.
my tolerance for struggle, I was not somebody who could compartmentalize, push things down, and kick the can down the road in the way some people can. Like, some people are able to really push down their truth for
Mm-hmm.
a longer time. But because of my degree of sensitivity, sensory processing stuff, and just my nature, there was a lot of instant karma for me. And so my journey, while certainly convoluted, I feel was never too far away from my purpose. It
Mm-hmm.
was just that it was the way I was led into my purpose was through a lot of pain and a lot of misunderstandings about myself and kind of the nature of the universe.
And it's very much an interesting journey when it
Yeah.
comes through like that. And I commend you for being so close to that purpose and staying with it and recognizing it, because in hindsight, we can possibly all see that and identify that, okay, that's it, really wasn't so far away. But when you're in it, like perhaps many of our listeners are, when they're in the heaviness of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, for instance, of what's going on out there, numbing and not addressing and not looking at what's really happening, the purpose can feel like on the other
Way
side of
out
the
there,
world. It
way
can
out
feel
there.
so far.
Well, and I want to be really clear. It wasn't like I didn't have a lot of self doubt and a lot of low self esteem and a lot of questioning and a lot of like, am I barking completely up the wrong tree? Am I going in the wrong direction? Am I am I delusional in thinking that I have a higher purpose? Like, there certainly I got to deal with kind of like the devils of the ego and the devils of self doubt, and listening to a lot, like, it wasn't always like I was just like, even though I'm going through this incredibly difficult time, I know I have a higher purpose. Like, there
Mm-hmm.
were absolutely many times in my life where I was like, am I, like, is this ever going to work out? Is this ever going to make sense? Am I ever going to find my way? And yet there was just this quality, this, and I think we all have it, this kind of this little teeny tiny light, this spark of hope that's inside of us, that just kind of, that part of us, that just that little whisper that's saying, keep going, keep going,
Yes.
keep going. And
Yes.
I know, I've known, I believe, I mean, I remember previous lives. I've had lives where I didn't keep going. I've had lives where
Mm-hmm.
I really did get to the point where I was just like, this is, I was ready to scrap it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there are points where it's like the loudness of the world and the loudness of our trauma and the loudness of everything just drowns out that little tiny spark and that little voice.
Yes.
Thankfully, this particular lifetime, that whisper was enough of a roar that
Good.
even in the worst of things, there was still that part of me that knew there was something better, that
Yes.
knew that other things were possible.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's so pivotal for us to hold on to that, even at the rock bottom. I mean, you've got a journey, I've got a journey, everybody's got a journey, because that's why we're here.
That is why we're here.
So it's,
Absolutely.
our responsibility to unravel that. So beautifully how you kept hold of that spark, because no doubt that's what leads you to do what you do. So, what are your intentions with the crafts that you have mastered so far?
What are my intentions? My intentions are to keep showing up day in, day out and listening to divine guidance and doing what I'm told.
Yes.
On a sort of on a much more concrete level, my intentions are to support other people with, through the courses and the trainings and the group mentoring and the one-on-one work that I do, as well as, leading master classes and things, and just offering support in all as many different ways as I can, as I have the time, the energy, and the capacity and the ability to do. And also to keep writing, to keep making art, to keep playing with fragrances and flowers and beads and beauty and elderberry syrup, making elderberry syrup.
Mm-hmm.
And for a really concrete intention, the book I mentioned earlier that I channeled this summer is right on the verge of, it's in the hands of my content editor right now, who's kind of giving it a once over and kind of fluffing material, sort of going this part, like just kind of giving it a little bit of a kind of what's what, and then it will come back into my hands and I will work it and massage it and write
Yes.
with it and turn it into a book that can be read by other people.
Beautiful.
So um those are my intentions. I wanted to say something. You were talking about the strength to hold on. I actually feel like for me, it's like I feel like that it's grace. It's
Mm.
grace. It is not strength. It is grace. There, but for the grace of the angels go I. That there are so many places and so many times where if it had just been my human strength, if it had just been my ego, I would have just crashed and burned. And I feel like there has been a thread of divine grace that has carried me again and again and again, and has allowed me to, and has lifted me up in a way that, so that I didn't drown at times when I really easily could have. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And those are the powerful moments where
yeah,
we really sit in that place of gratitude.
yes, yes. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I think a lot of times, at least in my life, those moments of gratitude are preceded by some of the darkest moments and by some of the
Yes.
greatest doubt. I had the experience right uh right after my back in May of 2020. My dad died from COVID, although he had been
Mm.
struggling with dementia for quite a while before that. So
Mm.
he was it was his time, but it was a very stressful time, obviously for our planet and also certainly for me and my family.
Mhm.
And I had been going through a lot of empathic distress at that point in time. And I had done a session with one of my mentors where I just really broke down and was sobbing and sobbing because I was feeling so devoid of spirit and feeling so disconnected from my faith. And I just was like, I just broke down and I just was like, please, please, please help me because I cannot do this on my own. And right after we had finished the session, my doorbell rang. And actually, it wasn't even after the session, it was during the session. The doorbell rang and the mailman brought me a package. And inside of the package was this envelope, was this um, certificate from the Society of Saint Therese, Our Little Flower, because a friend of mine had enlisted my father for perpetual prayer in the society.
Mm.
And it was just this thing where there was like this level of, I could not have made up the timing. I could not have made up the message.
Mm.
That there was this like, I am here. I am listening. I am supporting you. I am right there with you. I see your pain. I acknowledge it, and you're not alone. And it was just like just all the light that just flooded back into my soul, my heart, and
Mhm.
reminded me like I am not alone in this, that I am supported, that this is here.
How beautiful. How
Yeah.
beautiful of a share. Thank you so much. And my
Oh, you're
condolences
so welcome. Thank you.
for the
Yeah.
passing of your father. But in the same token, we know that spirit lives on. And
Well, and we actually, interestingly, my relationship with my father became substantially like it became way more
Mhm,
frictionless once he
mhm,
crossed over. And he not only, I'm part of a very active prayer community and a very eclectic, non-denominational, non-religious prayer community dedicated to the forgotten earth wisdom of the Blessed Mother and Our Lady, encoded within the Rosary. And my father, and one of the things that we do is we really honor and revere our ancestors in this community. And my father has kind of become like he goes everywhere. Like people call on my dad for help about, he was a
mm.
Virgo in life, and he is like, now he's like a super Virgo on the other
Yes.
side. But so my father has definitely not disappeared. My father has really
Mhm,
made his presence known. And so for me, death is not an ending as much as
mhm,
it is a change.
mhm.
Now, I also know that there are certain deaths that when you're emotionally, physically, energetically interconnected with them, and they are in your life, like really merged in your life, there is definitely a lot of adjustment.
Mhm,
And so,
mhm.
I'm not saying that it's not hard when we
Yes.
lose people, because it is, because
Yes.
that transition, they're not there to take out the trash.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're not there to soothe you.
To know or hug you. You can't feel a hug the same way. And
Absolutely.
while some of us might be able to hear their voice, and some of us may be able to even see them in our mind, and really sense their presence, it is not the same. And that is just true.
And it isn't, but in the same token, as painful and hard that it is to witness that and go through it, it's still for the evolution of your own soul.
Yes.
It's still a necessary thing. Just
Mhm.
as the night will fall, it's a
Yes.
necessary thing.
Well, and it's a natural thing. I mean, as we are cells in the body of this earth, as we are part of
Mhm.
this earth, cells die and renew. Like
Absolutely.
they are not designed to just be perpetual. Like cells that just keep on growing, that's cancer. Like
Mhm,
we
mhm.
are made for to be part of, like we are made to rise up and then go back down. And this time of year is such a perfect example of that, because frost
Yes.
is just starting to hit. I'm seeing my basil is already, but my basil, my tomatoes, my cucumbers have already been taken out by
Done.
the wet, by
Yes.
the frost. But everything else is still beautiful and green and lush and blooming. And yet I know that within about 6 weeks, it's going to be it's going to be barren and brown,
Mhm,
and the trees are going to start to become more and more bare, and everything is going to go to sleep for a while. Everything is going to
mhm.
go dormant. All of these things that have died will start to decay to feed the soil. And then, but also all of these, like all the cucumbers and tomatoes that dropped, they're putting seeds into the ground. And
That's right.
come next spring, there will be little tomato seedlings that are going to rise up, and little Mexican
Yes.
cucumber seedlings that are going to rise up, and all these other things, because that's the way it works. And
That's
it's
absolutely.
it's sad to me that as humans we've been fighting this truth for so
Mhm,
hard, like this
mhm.
idea that somehow death is not inevitable. Like it is the one guarantee we have, is that we are going to die. If we're born,
100%.
we will die. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's part of the process. That's part of the journey of why we're here,
Exactly.
to unravel, to heal and experience and witness, but also to rebirth certain aspects of ourselves too. So it's a big one.
It is a big one.
It
Yeah, this
is.
whole conversation has been a big one. Really delicious.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful And I feel like I could talk to you for another couple of hours at
Oh,
least.
you and I absolutely, we could have an amazing, amazing conversation.
And
Totally. Yeah.
and I know there will be more to follow. I
I
really
have
feel
a
like there's
feeling,
going to be more to.
just because I was thinking the way that you and I work, it really does feel kind of like there's this beautiful synergy going on. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. There is a synergy.
Hmm.
So we will continue this conversation. But for our listeners, I want to say, hopefully, we have seeded some beautiful nuggets of wisdom that you have shared so graciously
Mm.
and so abundantly, for individuals to really look and reflect of what is it they have, what opportunities they have, and how can they really relish this opportunity called life, because it truly is a gift as much as the adage is oversaid and overdone. I am so grateful for your time, energy, and support of this podcast. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Naranjan, thank you so much for having me. It really, this has just been a perfect conversation. Like the rest of this day, the rest of this week,
Yeah,
like as we, yeah, so yummy. Thank you so much. It's
you're
really been a
welcome.
delight to be here.
I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.